So today we are going to look at Purim. As we say in Western culture, Purim and this Hebraic culture. And Purim was celebrated actually on Thursday. And Purim isn't just for Jewish people, it's for the entire people that are grafted into Judaism. That's us. You look at the book of Romans, we know we are grafted in. We are all spiritual Jews, if not original Jews in background. So we are going to be looking at this. Yeah, I'll put on a little bit. So who remembers what Purim is? I know we've talked about it a number of times. What is Purim? Oh, well, that's as a general list. You're not going to get from that. Anybody remember what Purim is?
And rescue.
The name of it?
Yeah,
What is the holiday about?
Satan wanted to make puree out of the Jews.
You might say that. That's a terrible way of looking at it. It's about a wicked man who was an early form of an antichrist. Okay, so you're right with the Satan part, the apostate part, if you will. And he's trying to wipe out all of the Jewish people, trying to annihilate them. And he's smooth, and he has some money to throw around to entice a king to hurry and sign a writ that cannot be revoked. And that writ declares the annihilation of entire people. As if you were writing a commission slip or something. You took the school or something. So this is the holiday we're looking at, Purim, which is Purim. And Pur actually means a lot. A lot like a dice that you would cast or a stick that you would draw from a number of sticks. One would be longer than the other one. And those sticks or that dice, however those lots were in that day, they were telling what day that this annihilation would take place. That an entire race of people would be wiped out in one day. The children, the oldsters, middle-aged people, everybody, man, woman, child, didn't matter. You were Jewish, you were going to be annihilated. And this wasn't just in one place. It was over 127 different provinces in Persia. So we're talking about from India clear down to Ethiopia. A huge range of places. And so the king is centered in a city named Shushan, and that is the capital of the Persian Empire. But then he has all of these, you might say, prime ministers of these different provinces throughout. And so this edict went out to all of those provinces at that time. And that on this day that was drawn, and the day that was drawn will be the 13th of Adar. Adar is the 12th month of the Hebrew calendar, and it is the 13th day. So you can imagine, the one who draws out is like, hey, it's the 13th! It's just maddening to think how excited they were to know that the day has been selected to annihilate a group of people. And of course, if that group of people was annihilated, we wouldn't be here today, because there would be no Messiah coming from the Jewish one. When is the history? It was 42 BC. To be exact. 42 BC. And 50 years earlier, what happens? What happened? 50 years earlier, under Cyrus, the Jewish people who were in captivity were allowed to go back to Jerusalem. But many stayed in Babylon, which is now the Persian Empire, because the Persians, the Medes and the Persians, took over the Babylonians. And so now it's not the Babylonian Empire, it's the Persian Empire. And it's under the Persian king. So while many people went back to Jerusalem, many people stayed there. Remember, they were there for quite a while. And while they were there, they got to be ingrained in living there in the customs, and it became home to them. I mean, when you live there long enough, some of those people never even saw Jerusalem before. They were young, maybe. And, so there were many people living there in Shushan yet. And then we look at all throughout the empire too, but many people remained without going back to Israel. And so that's kind of the setting for what we're looking at Lot's wife, and will remain nameless today. No. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with the same way we always start Hanukkah with. Mary's going to assist me in some candle lighting. And we use the same blessing for Hanukkah as we do for Purim. Because we both deal with the same topic, the proposed annihilation of people. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. But, let's see, I skipped a line here. Sha'asha nisim la'avotenu b'yamayim ha'hem b'zman hazeh. Blessed are you, eternal, our God, sovereign of the universe, who performed miracles for our ancestors in those days and this time. And then our second candle. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehekiyanu, lekikimanu, lahigimanu, lasman hazeh. Amen. Blessed are you, the eternal, our God, sovereign of the universe, who has kept us alive, sustained us, and enabled us to reach this season. Amen. So on your screen here, and I have my little sheet pad here that printed out as landscape, so I couldn't really find it very well. And use it with my feet too. So an eternal principle concerning the Jewish people, we find this in Genesis, early on. Did you see God's omniscient? He knows a lot. He knows everything. And so he knew what was going to be coming down the pike. He knew that from the very beginning that Satan, that as Lucifer fell and brought angels with him, they were all about taking God's glory, all about being worshipped in place of God. Whatever God had, they wanted to pervert and make it their own. And so from the very beginning, we see this in the Bible. This is back to Genesis, Bereshit 12:3. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curseth thee. And in thee, the Jewish people, all families of the earth will be blessed. That's why Yeshua, when he came to save the lost sheep of Israel, that through them, that the world will be blessed. And so now that he's come, now we have a reversal, and that's kind of the theme of this story too, reversals. Now it's the Christians that are blessing Israel and trying to bring them back to their own Messiah. And it says that, they will be aroused by jealousy of their own Messiah, that other people have accepted him too. And so, to the Jew first, and then to the Gentile. And now, back the other way too. Now we draw the Jewish people into their own Messiah. So, as Brad was saying, we are at the year 482 BC now. And we are looking at the Feast of Purim. And it is a story of miracles. It is a story of unbelievable odds that are overcome. It is a story of hiddenness, of not being revealed. In fact, in the whole story of Purim, we don't even see the name God mentioned. But yet, he is there in every aspect of it. And the idea behind this is that God is always with us, number one. But that we need not fear when we trust in him, because he is our provider. He is a God of mighty miracles, and that even though his name isn't officially spoken, it's the knowledge, the knowing that he's always with you. The people are fasting and praying, we just don't see the name God mentioned in that, but that's who they're praying to, and that's who they're fasting for. Okay, so in this picture on Purim, we see our heroine here. We did see our heroine? Oh, okay. Well, she is Esther. Esther is not her real name. Esther is her made-up name because they don't want her to look too Jewish, And so her myrtle. And if you go down south, you'll see a bunch of myrtle trees, pretty crinkled kind of flower, beautiful. So she is Myrtle. But her name was changed then because her cousin who was raising her warns her, don't have this Jewish name, okay, because you're treated differently. It won't be good for you. So she accepts the Babylonian name of Esther, which is a derivative of Ishtar, which is a Babylonian goddess. We won't get into her. That's a whole other story. All right. So it is a lesser Jewish festival. It's held in the spring on the 14th or the 15th day of Adar to commemorate the defeat of Haman's plot to massacre the Jews as recorded in the book of Esther. Okay, so we said that the lot was drawn for the 13th of Adar. So that's when all the fighting takes place, and we'll get into it a little bit. And so after the fighting was done, remember they were all supposed to be killed in one day throughout the entire empire? So that would have been the 13th of Adar. So it's the 14th of Adar that they rest, that they celebrate the victory that God has given them. And if you happen to be in Shushan, which is the capital city, well, they fought for one more day. And so their day of rest was the 15th. So you could say that it's on the 14th and the 15th, based on where you live in that day. And that's what we celebrate today on the 14th. Okay? So the book of Esther is the only book, like I was saying, that doesn't have God's name in it, but God is with them all the way. And God knows his people. Okay, it always begins with the reading of the Megillah of Esther. Yeah, this is the Megillah of Esther. It's a scroll. It tells the story of Esther. Just kind of roll it here as you're reading it here. Okay. So imagine it rolling, what it's supposed to be rolling. Everyone's imagining it? Much bigger. Yeah, this is more of a commemorative kind of scroll, but it is actually real for the sake. Okay. So we read the story. Of course, we're limited in time. At the temple, we read every chapter. Every chapter. And oftentimes they will have people dressed as characters of the Esther story that are reading a certain chapter that that's primarily about. And so they'll read all the chapters. So it takes a long, long time to read, the temple when that's read. But then you do have a nice buffet afterwards, a nice sweet buffet. So good things come to you with. All right. So in lieu of that, those congregations that don't do an entire reading of the Megillah of Esther, they will have what's called a Purim Spiel. Now, big German, Spiel is just always talking, but a Spiel in Yiddish would be a short or abbreviated version of the story. So not reading it literally, it's telling you a paraphrased version of that. And so, like I was saying, the paraphrased version is it's about a group of people that are in an area that were brought there as captives. They ended up staying, and then from that group of people, a wicked man arose to destroy that group of people. And God's mighty miracle prevented that from happening, and the people lived, and the perpetrator, the Antichrist, was killed in the very plot that he meant for the Jews. That is my Purim Spiel. Okay. All right, so to introduce some of the characters here in the story, it's interesting because I'm teaching English right now in high school, and when we start a new novel, we always have the kids look through their character list, and they have to write about that character, who that character was, and how they were relevant to the story, and so forth. And so we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to look at that list of characters. There they are, in all their glory. All right, we see Mordecai. Mordecai is the man that is a cousin of Esther, who was Hadassah formerly. And he raises her until her adulthood. And a very good man, very kindly man, very godly man. And then he raises Esther, and he gives her the new advising her on how she should be in the story. Esther then is a now grown-up woman, very beautiful, beautiful woman. So she becomes the new queen of the Persian Empire. And it is through her and through her courage, through her chutzpah, that the people of God are saved. And then we have Haman, who's wearing that strange beehive-looking hat there in the picture. He is the Antichrist version, okay? A version of an Antichrist, okay? Somebody out to kill God's people, out to be out for his own glory at anyone else's cost, okay? He's a very wealthy man because he's the second in charge of the Persian Empire. He's only second to the king, and basically his advice was taken very, very highly by the king. Basically, what he advised the king of, the king would basically do, because he trusted him so much with his kingdom. So when he was evil, and the king trusted him, bad things came. All right, we move then on to Ashvarosh, and that is his original name. But in Greek, since the Bible was translated as a Septuagint into Greek, his name became Xerxes. Yeah. If any of you saw 300, Xerxes the first was him. Okay, you remember how bizarre he was in that. You know, if you've ever seen the movie A Night with the King, okay, you know, you see him as this wonderful man, and you know, always parading around in nice clothes and just very wise. He was actually a pretty vile guy. There's a story about him where one of the people in his kingdom offered him a lot of money to help out his military, and he was honored by the gift and ended up giving the money back. He didn't really need it, and then he gave him a gift to boot. But then that same man that he honored so much by giving him back this gift, and it was a great relationship. When that same man asked him if his son could be, you know, spared duty in the army, in turn, with his rage, he had the son cut in half and had the entire army march in the middle of the two halves. This kind of like a covenant in the Old Testament with a steer, if you remember that. Another story. And so he was pretty an incredible man. He really liked his partying. In fact, he partied for 180 straight days. I was on a cruise once for 7 days, and that wasn't enough. You know, I enjoyed it. But, I mean, 180 days, and it was just like a big drink fest. And it was pretty vile. And then after the 180 days were done, she was making another 7 days for the people who lived there. So the people in Shushan continued to you know, party for another 7 days. Now, the seventh day of this festival, then, and he's pretty loopy. As were the people at this festival, this the last day of the festival, and he was kind of egged on, about his beautiful wife, and most stories really tone it down. They say that that he just wanted to show off his beautiful wife. Well, there was a lot more involved in that showing off, and when he sent 5 of his eunuchs to go have Vashti, whose name actually means the beautiful one, ironically. He was very much into beauty. He knew what he liked. And she refused. I mean, she probably had a lot of common sense, I would think. She didn't want to be made a spectacle of, and just to appease his vile ways. And so she refused to come. And when she refused to come, then he said to his advisors in his drunkenness, well, what can I do about that? He said, well, she's violated the law. She violated your order to come. So she can't be your queen, because what would happen to every woman in the whole province, in the whole empire, if your wife didn't listen to you as the king? What would that do? That would mean that they actually have a voice. You can't have that now, right? So so because of that, he could not have her as a queen anymore. She was expelled from the kingdom. And so that leaves him wifeless. So he starts a new search for beauty. And so he has his ministers go out into all the empire and to gather up the most beautiful women that they can find. It wasn't just one group of people, it was all these groups of people living in this whole empire, And so they brought the most beautiful women back to Shushan. And for 6 months, these women were pampered, and these women were, they had attendants, they had a head eunuch that was in charge of them, and they were being bathed for 6 months in myrtle. In myrrh, not myrtle. And for 6 months, it would give them a nice skin, and it would make them very good smell. Then after the 6 months, if that wasn't enough, then they had 6 more months of beauty treatments. And they all got like a 6-month pass to Mary Kay, or whatever they wanted. Cosmetics, it was about cosmetics, and about, more perfumes for 6 months of that. And they must have really smelled good, looked really good at that point. If they didn't look at that point, I think they were just out of the contest overall. But anyway, so one night with the king then would be when one of them would have their turn at meeting the king and getting to know each other. And then when he exhausted his list, he would think, okay, who do I want to call back? Who was a callback here? And so if you were called back, then you'd have another night with the king, and he would keep calling back whoever he wanted. Well, his pick of the litter was Esther. She was the most beautiful, and he was just taken with her. It was said that when they could pick out any jewelry or anything to wear, all the other gals, dressed to the nines like they were movie stars, you might say, even though they didn't have movies in those days. Pre-Christian movies. And, but she was rather plain. And she didn't really take too much jewelry or too much anything of that. And the king was kind of taken by that also. That she wasn't really trying to so impressive. It was just her beauty that stood on its own. Yeah. And he loved her, and he ended up being betrothed to her. He married her then. So Vashti's gone, and Esther's in. And so all was good in the kingdom for a while. They had a big wedding, and people were giving gifts from all over the empire for this huge wedding. And that becomes one of the themes of the holiday, also giving gifts. Okay? So we'll talk about that in a little bit. So anyway, these are the characters we're looking at here in the story of Okay. A famous quote here is, if you remain silent at this time, relief and salvation will come to the Jews from another source. So, let me back up here. So, although everything starts well and good, we have the character of Haman come into the story. Haman is very full of himself. Okay, he's the second in charge of the empire. He's the second only to the king. He's rich. He has a great palace. He wears the king's signet ring. Life is good for Haman, but not enough apparently, because as he goes through the town, people just bow down when he passes. Well, Jews don't do that. That's a shanda to do that. You don't do that. So, when he passes by Mordecai, he notices that Mordecai never bows down to him. At first he kind of overlooks it, kind of thinking, well, what the heck's that? Then he turns and he's enraged by the fact that he's not bowing down to him. So he devises a plot. He goes to the king, and he says, in your laws, we need to be bowed down to, because people need to follow our direction. And he says, if a person doesn't, they're against our government. They're against your laws. And they need to be put to death. And he says, how about if I give you 30 pieces of silver? And you could just sign this little writ here, in just stating that, that these people sounds reasonable. There's a law for heaven's sakes. Can't go against that. So he signs it. He impresses his signet ring into that hot wax. Now it's official. Cannot be revoked. Not even by the king. He can't say, "Oh, I changed my mind." It applies to everybody. The king. So Haman is all excited. He's all excited about this. And what he does, he goes and tells his wife. And he says, he tells them all about this plan to annihilate the Jews. And he's going to start with this Mordecai, the guy that he was really obsessed with, the Jewish guy that was the cousin of Esther that raised him, that raised her rather. And he builds a 50-cubit-high hangman's noose, a gallows, in his front yard. At the advice of his wife, of course. See, that's why they didn't let him talk.
Yeah, there you go.
Lillian. But she was kind of a loudmouth. She was, actually, historically. Not a good person. So he builds this 50-cubit-high gallows, and this is what Mordecai is to be hung on that to start off this annihilation process. All right. So a writ is posted then in Shushan, and Mordecai reads the writ. Then on the 13th day of Adar, because he now decided the date of their annihilation, that anybody in the province that wants to kill Jews, they are given that directive to do that. And they're going to have a big festival killing Jews that day. It's going to be the activity of the day throughout the whole empire. Imagine that. Horrible, horrible. Women, children, everybody to be slaughtered. And all because this writ that Haman made in the king's sign. And so we see that Mordecai then goes to his cousin, Esther, and he tells her of this plot because she knew nothing about it. She maybe put on more cologne or maybe more cosmetics. She had some left over from that whole flaky 1-year period. But anyway, at any rate, he tells her that she needs to go to the king and intercede for the Jewish people. So that's where this book comes from. If you were to read Simon Esther this time, your belief in salvation will come from another source. And it will come to the Jewish people to save them. But God has chosen you. You are the queen of the Persian Empire. But she has this problem. The problem is, she can't approach the king without being invited. Yes, quite a barricade at that time, Hans State. No women for dinner, okay? We put it in our own culture. But in those days, it was at the penalty of death. Okay, so if you approach the king and you weren't invited, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. No. Sayonara to you, Sorry. And so it was like 3 days afterwards, and she's still thinking, well, I haven't been invited yet. He still, hasn't called me to be in his presence. And she remains silent. God will use somebody else. And goes on to say that, just because you're the queen, don't think that you would be spared from this because you are a Jew. So it doesn't matter what your position is here. Don't think you're going to get away from it. So anyway, this picture that you're looking at right now, so you can see that in this picture that you're looking right now with the king and Esther kneeling before him. Keep going, forward. You're going to see a picture with the king and Esther. There it is. Okay. And so she goes before the king in a great silence in his presence, as his advisors are all there looking at what's happening. Doors swing open, she goes in, and it's like, everybody knew that she wasn't invited. Everybody knew that the penalty of that was death. So there's a nice pregnant pause there. And then that king, I'm going to wear this because of another part of the source. Put this on. Probably on Hans Hus, where I am. And it's a lot easier because I had to wear this at the temple on Thursday. It was really hot. Everybody else wore these nice costumes from the play, and I wore a wolf. And I was late, like 10 minutes late going in. And they're all looking at me like,
You were a wolf.
so I sat kind of in the back, because people were staring and stuff. But anyway, so the king, instead of, putting her to death, he reaches out his golden curtain rod. Oh, you mean his scepter? Imagine this is a golden scepter. He reaches it out, and he reaches it over to Esther. She grabs it. That means that he's found favor in her life and her spirit. Because he loved her very much. He said nice things to him, and was very good to him. That should be the case always. All right. Then we see, and you in the house of your father will be lost, and who knows? It's not just for such a time as this. He says to Mordecai, still speaking to Esther. For such a time as this, that you reach this royal position. So Mordecai is telling her that God has put you in this position. He has selected you. He's chosen you. Just like He's chosen each one of us for a very specific job for the kingdom. Our lives aren't just a cosmic coincidence. We didn't get here by, just to live, to eat, breathe, or die. Okay? We're here for a purpose, just like she was there for a very specific purpose, too. And God has given each one of us that purpose. Okay, so then, and fear not them which kill the body, we find this in Matthew, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear Him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. So this is kind of in reference again to what Esther was feeling, approaching the king, knowing that she most likely would be killed by approaching him to intercede for the Jewish people. You find in the book of Matthew. When Esther bade them return, Mordecai said to Samson, Go, gather all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast. And fast for me, who is interceding to God. And neither eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And so we see the element of people, the Jewish people, refraining from food, fasting, praying to God for a miracle, that they would somehow, beyond all imagination, survive this thing. And for Mordecai, he would not be starting off this whole procedure of being hanged as the beginnings of this. Now, in the meantime, we find that Mordecai was a witness to two people that were guards for the king, and he overheard them at the gate one night plotting to kill the king. And so he tells Esther that she should go to the king and reveal this plot. And she did. This is before, actually, I'll backtrack a little bit. And it was researched, and it was found to be true. People were put to death on those two men. And it was written about in the royal annals that were kept in the king's personal library. Okay? So we're back at Esther being granted life. She's touched the royal scepter, and her life has been spared by the king. And he says, what can I do for you? What is your request? What is your petition? And she said, if you find favor with me, please come to my banquet that will be prepared for you, and also bring Haman with you. And he's thinking, well, judging from his love of parties, in the earlier part of the story, I'm sure he said, yeah, sounds great. Okay, we'll be there. No questions asked. So they go there, and Haman is all full of himself as usual, and he brags to his wife, he's like, hey, nobody else was invited but me. It's just the king, me, and the queen. And it's like he's really, they're going to honor me there just at this banquet. And so the king has a very sleepless night. And in that sleepless night, he gets up to read a book. Like many people, when they can't fall asleep, they read a book. Reading a book puts me in sleep immediately almost. But the one scroll that he pulls out is the scroll that deals with this incident of the two people that were plotting to kill him. And it's a record of that. And so he says to Haman when he comes, he says, what would you do to reward somebody, that has done a great thing for you, basically? And Haman's thinking about, let's talk about me, So what should you do? Well, I think that, I would say, just let him have one of your steeds you ride on. Give him one of your cloaks, one of your garments to wear, your coats. Give him your signet ring too. And then honor by parading them all throughout Shushan, capital, so people can pay homage to this man. He's thinking that he's being talked about. And so then the king says, all right, then do this for Mordecai. It's like, what, Mordecai? It's like, it's about me. No, it's about Mordecai instead. And so he's incensed that he has to bring Mordecai throughout the streets here. The man that he wants to have put to death, he's already made his gallows for him in his yard. And he has to honor him with that. I mean, talk about another reversal of the story.
Yeah.
What the enemy meant for evil, God meant for good. We sang about that earlier in the song. That is one of the themes of this story. And so he's parading him around, and just like flabbergasted that he has to parade Mordecai to honor him, the person he wants to kill. Okay, so we already talked about Esther going before the king, Ahasuerus, and now we're at the gallows. So then the king says, so what is your petition? Now that we're at this party, what's your petition, queen? My petition is that you come back tomorrow night and we want another banquet. Again, the king thought, it's a pretty good idea. Again, you like to party. So they go back a second night then. And the second night, then, that is when Esther reveals that Haman has come up with this terrible plot to destroy a group of people. Her people. She says, I am the Jew, and he wants to annihilate all of the Jews. And yet you signed this written, and you signed it. He reveals this plot of Haman. And he's incensed. He's furious. It's like, you deceived me, and you tricked me into signing this thing that I can't take away now. And it's to kill a group of people that my wife is one of, I never knew before. She says, if it please you, I plead for my life and for the life of my people. So he storms out of the room. He's like, so, take it off. As you can imagine. And so Haman pleads for his life with the queen. Although I don't know what he thinks that's going to prove, because when you've ticked off the king, that's that. So he's begging for her to do something to intercede for him, because he knows now that it's a death sentence for him if nothing else changes. And as he's interceding, he basically falls into her lap. And so when the king comes back into the room, he thinks that he's molesting the queen now. What a topper, It's like, no, and this is a precarious situation, but I'm not. I'm just, pleading for my life, So anyway, then the king says, okay, you are going to hang on the gallows that you made for Mordecai. And so it was. So he hanged on those gallows that he thought he was going to kill Mordecai. Another reversal of the story, reversal of fortune. Not only was he hung on those gallows, but also his 10 sons were as well. And the king said unto Esther, the queen, the Jews have destroyed 500 men in Shushan, because they had to go through with this order. Okay, he can't revoke it. So he's already said to the people, I'm giving you free reign to kill killing Jews on the 13th of Adar. Okay? And so all throughout the kingdom, this has to be upheld. But what he did is he said, you have the right to arm yourselves. You have the right to assemble and to fight off anybody who's going to come against you. Okay? And so on the 13th of Adar, there were those people that came against the Jews, and there were also many people that converted to Judaism because they saw the mighty hand of God. They saw that this people was a favored people, and they actually joined the people of God. Those people that didn't were killed in the process through warfare because they didn't arm themselves. And so then in Shushan, 500 people were recorded to have died that day. And then the queen says, or the king says to the queen, now what is your petition? It shall be granted to thee whatever you request further. And Esther says, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan, do it tomorrow, as according to this day's decree. Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. Well, so we know that, you can't repeat what has already been done. Haman has already been hung. We know that fighting has already taken place, so how can you just repeat that? But actually what she was doing, she was speaking words of prophecy. Prophecy is something that will come in the future. And it came in our not so distant future. It came during World War II. So as you can see from the photo that will appear by a miracle, here it is. Julius Streicher, who was the publisher of the German Nazi newspaper Der Stürmer, which means like the stormtrooper or the antagonist. And his fellow Nazis, it's about Julius Streicher and his fellow Nazis that were at the Nuremberg trials, October 16, 1946. On the Jewish calendar, October 16, 1946, it corresponded to the year of 5707, the month of Tishrei. The date was the 7th day of the Feast of Sukkot. The day was called Hoshana Rabbah. If you remember teaching about Sukkot, that's like the high day, the high holy day of that holiday season. The Jews believe that this day represents the coming time when God's verdict of judgments are given. So another sign of prophecy then. So as they're starting to hang, these 10 people, these Nazi conspirators, they get up to Julius Streicher, and as he is barred by the guard to approach the steps to the gallows, he yells out, "Heil Hitler!" Because he's still very firm in his earthly endeavors here, which were evil. And then as he gets up closer to being to the gallows, and he's starting to move up the steps, he's starting to struggle, and as they put the hoodwink on him, he yells out, "Purimfest, 1946. And, I interpret this to be that the evil spirit that has always been around, evil spirit is always trying to annihilate the Jewish people, that, they were using this man and other people to annihilate the Jews, and I just believe there was a demon speaking through him. He yells, "Purimfest, 1946. No Nazi would recognize Purim. And in the Hebrew Bible, and I have this on the next slide, here we are. So here you see the trial here in 1946. And if you look at little circles, like see in the very top line on the right side, there's a little circle there, and then you move down a little bit, there's another little circle, another circle. These circles, when put together, they read 1946. And it's a story of Purim. And those 10 names there are the names of 10 sons of Haman that were killed.
And what's on the right side?
The names. There are 3 letters that, in small, lowercase letters that which will be 1946. Because remember, all the letters in Hebrew have a numeric value with them. So 1946, he yells out Purim Fest. Pretty incredible, huh? So the 10 sons of Haman were killed, and then here at this trial, 10 Nazi conspirators were killed. Now we say, well, Haman was killed too. So the counterpart of Haman then in this story becomes Goering. Goering, Hitler's right-hand man. And he is in prison, and a Nazi sympathizer slips him some cyanide so he won't be hung. And so yet another one meets the criteria of the story too. And not to mention, people can go further, and they were saying that Haman actually had a daughter as well who committed suicide. And so people are drawing the analogy that the daughter that committed suicide is paralleled now with Goering, who was a known transvestite, who would often wear women's clothing at different parties and stuff. Pretty amazing, huh? Pretty amazing. So, it goes to show, though, that we aren't just looking at history. If we're wise, we see history as foretelling what's going to be coming. There will be an Antichrist. There will be an Antichrist that is going to want us to bow down to him and to deny the true God. In fact, he's going to do it in the temple, the Antichrist. He'll come in and he'll demand everybody's worship as he declares himself to be God. This is coming. Okay, and all throughout history we find different groups of people wanting to annihilate the Jews. Why? To prevent God's Messiah from coming to the people, to save people, to give people salvation. And all throughout history, we look at the Inquisition. We look at things like this. We look at even our own day. Even in our own time. People are chanting, from river to the sea. Okay? Which is actually a perversion of God's words to Abraham, when he talks about the promised land. God makes him a promise that from the river to the sea, your descendants will be and my people. And so now they pervert this. Now from the river to the sea means that you're going to be annihilated from the Mediterranean Sea to the Jordan River. Now you're going to, in other words, all of Israel will be wiped out. Annihilation again. Coincidence? No. Not coincidence. It's just a repeat. That spirit will always exist until Yeshua comes. Okay? And we need to be wise enough to see it happening. It's recognize it for what it is. Just as I need to be wise enough to hit a portrait mode instead of a landscape. All right. So therefore the Jews and the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month of Adar a day of great gladness and fasting, and a good day and of sending portions to one another. Today, Jews, one of the things you do on Purim is you will send a Purim basket. And you're actually expected to send 2 Purim baskets to somebody less fortunate than yourself, to the poor, to the needy, and that would be full of food items. Why? So that everybody, a unification of all the people of God's family, would be able to partake in the joy of the holiday, of God's provision, that they survived, that through his miracles they made it. And so I think that's a wonderful thing, that spirit of tzedakah, which is charity, of giving to others, is very important. It's not just saying, okay, well, we've got all this stuff, and we're going to celebrate the holiday, and while there are poor that have nothing, and people that are unable to celebrate, that they are thinking of all of the people, all of their mishpachah, their whole family overall. So everything is turned on its head. Be'achafoku, it means being turned upside down. Okay, it's a lot of reversals. Mordecai is left to live. Haman dies on the gallows that he creates. We see an orphan girl of Jewish background become the queen of Persia. We see after this whole thing, what happens with Mordecai, instead of being killed, he inherits everything that was Haman's. He inherits his palace, he inherits all his goods. Everything was his, and he gets his signet ring to wear. And then he becomes the second-hand man in Persia. So a Jew ruling as the second in the Persian Empire. Just like the story of Joseph, you know. Right. Who started as being bought as a slave. Promotion. Moses, you know, a Jew sailing down the river in a basket. Instead of being killed, the other male children, mother sends him down, and he's raised in the royal family. To his high post under Ramses. So the evil Haman is hung on his enormous gallows that were prepared for Mordecai. These are more reversal. The evil Haman is hung on his own enormous gallows were prepared for Mordecai. And the Jewish people go from being almost exterminated to having a great victory. And many people join them also. Okay, so celebrating Purim then. Some things here. One of the ways we celebrate Purim is we dress up in costumes or we wear masks. And the reason being is to celebrate God's hiddenness. And we know that even Yeshua, remember? How he didn't want things to be revealed. He didn't want people to say, well, don't say anything. You know, the time isn't right yet. He spoke in parables, which were hidden sayings that only God's elect would understand. And so it talks about the idea of hiddenness. So therefore we have costumes and it's a fun celebration. So you can wear costumes. Sometimes we have Purim plays where people act out the different characters of the story of Esther. And it's just all about celebration, all about fun. Parading through the streets in costume and just having a good time. One of the things that we eat on Purim are hamantashen. And hamantashen, we call them Haman's hats today. It looks like a threefold hat that Haman would have worn. Food's meant to be eaten. So that's going to have a hamantashen. And then in the 1500s, a rabbi writes that they were Haman's ears, because he writes that Haman's ears were cut off before he was hanged. And that looked like a pig's ears. Now, pigs were sacrilege to the Jewish people, you know, so it makes kind of good poetic license, you might say, there for that. But, you know, stuff with fruit fillings and poppy seed, typically. Hamantashen. And then you have drinks. A lot of wine at Purim, because people are celebrating. Okay? And again, another reversal out of all those parties that the king had for evil reasons, evil purposes. You know, they're celebrating now. Okay? Celebrating their existence. We have a grogger. Oh! And I forgot to say something. You know, every time we would say the name Haman, and I skipped this part, he brought some grogger food. But he makes a lot of noise. Okay? And so if I mention Haman, mention Mordecai, and then I maybe mention Haman, you're blotting that sound out. Okay? And so this one comes from Israel. It's a nice, very good looking grogger. Now it has some of the cheaper versions that we have at the party store for $4.98. So anyway, so that's a great way to celebrate. The Purim baskets also, like I mentioned earlier, and usually you get two of those. Today designed for Purim baskets that are largely sent to the military today in Israel. And it's our way of supporting them. Okay, so we see some people in costumes here on this next slide, and they are having fun. We see a man on our left dressed up like Haman, and then we see Esther in the middle there, and then we see Ashkashverosh on the right side, or the left side here on the left, and in costume. And then some final thoughts. We celebrate Purim today because we're celebrating God's miracles, His providence, the fact that He has allowed us to live, the gift of life. Life isn't an accident. We all have life for a purpose. Esther, we see, had an extraordinary purpose. But your purpose is just as extraordinary because God has designed it for you individually. We bring gifts, we share gifts to those in need. We're mindful of those amongst us that don't have the things that we might have. The hiddenness of the holiday, that even in our darkest places, in our roughest times, God provides. Jehovah Jireh is always there for His people. And even though we can't see Him, and in this story, how many things were hidden from plain view, God is always there. We might not always see Him. We might not hear an audible voice. We might not see a clear sign when we pray right away. But we have the faith to move like you were saying earlier. We believe in faith in God. Because we know that He is. We know what He's capable of. We know that He is for us and not against us. And again, we are also mindful that Satan is very persistent. He doesn't say, okay, well, I guess we lost. No, He'll come back in another way. But His intentions are always the same from the very beginning of time. It's all about worshiping Him. Whatever God is, He wants to be. And He's going to deceive people. And there will be many people that will be deceived. As our pastor always says, is one of his famous quotes from the Bible. The path is, you want to say it since you always say it? The narrow road.
Oh, yeah. Right. Enter through the narrow gate, the narrow road, that leads to life, the broad way, or broad leads to death, and both go that way. And few ever find.
If you ever find it. Most people will be deceived. Even look at attempts of the government to control people. This is also something that plays into all this control of people through power. Okay. So then our last slide then. Perhaps you were created for such a time as this, like Esther was. A reminder of how God puts us into positions and situations for His purpose. He's using every one of us. He wants to use every one of us. He's created different situations for each one of us. And that's what we rely on God for, to carry us through those times and to trust in Him, knowing that we will come out ahead, that He's for us and not against us. So God bless the reading of the story of Esther, and God bless His things historically that we can look back at.
We'll do a second offering next week for Julia and her wedding, and she's in Rwanda. But would you close us with her? Okay, why don't we stand as we...
Yes, we'll bless it.
Yeah.
Jag berättar live, vad